Hello again, everyone. This is Silver de la Rosa, and I welcome you to my YouTube channel, On Silver Screen, where learning is interesting. Today, we will talk about e-tendering, and this is episode 11 of our Season 2 Procurement and Tendering. Please support this channel by hitting like on the video and sharing the video to your friends, especially those who are preparing for their APC. And if you haven't done yet, please subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell so that you will be notified every time I upload a new video. Do note that this presentation is not prescriptive in nature, but our aim is to discuss the industry's best practices when it comes to tendering via electronic means. Here we are going to talk about the introduction to e-tendering, the tender methodology that can be applied, the technology that can be used. We will also talk about certain security issues, the tendering procedures, and the assessing the tenders and notifying the results to the tenderers. The primary reference of this discussion is the RICS Guidance Note on E-Tendering 2nd edition. Now, what is E-Tendering? E-Tendering is defined as the issuance and receipt of any tender documentation in electronic format as part of the procurement process. It relates to the management of the contractor selection and price-setting process as part of the procurement of construction work. There are advantages for e-tendering, and these are simplifying the process, reducing the tendering cost, environmentally friendly and sustainable process, avoiding the need for multiple entry of the same information, and enabling a fairer assessment between tenders. Even though we have these advantages, there are also some barriers why e-tendering is not widely used. And some of these barriers are the lack of agreed standards, little or no impartial advice. Also, there is a fear of legal and technical traps. The distinct stages of e-tendering is drafted in the following 10-point plan. First, choose the right medium. Then choose the right method to be applied. And choose the technology or check the technology available. Next is check the security issues that may need to be resolved. You also have to prepare the tender checklist. Afterwards, you make your preliminary inquiry. Then you can agree and set out the document standard and ensure its legality. Next is the return and evaluation of tenders. And if everything is checked and set out, you proceed with your e-tendering procedures. Take note that e-tendering is not restricted with any form of contract. It can be used with any form of contract. It is entirely concerned with the tender process and procedure and assumes that most appropriate procurement route has already been selected. And this aimed at dealing a number of perceived barriers in a wide-scale adoption of e-tendering within construction industry. And it addresses the complete process from preliminary inquiry through tender acceptance and withdrawal. Let us talk about the tender methodology that can be applied in e-tendering. Setting up a procurement process requires a series of decision-making such as choosing the procurement route. This activity allows you to distribute the risk between client and the contractor. This may not be necessarily require the exchange of information between the parties or between the contractor and the tender team. While selecting the contractor and setting the price, these processes relies heavily on the exchange of information between the contractor and the tender team. So how are you going to exchange this information? You have to choose the medium of data exchange. And the type of tender information that might be transferred in electronic format and the various methods available to transfer these should be considered. So what are the electronic format that can be used in tendering? The range of electronic format files to be transferred may include but not limited to the following: word processed, example the Microsoft Word; spreadsheets, example of these are Microsoft Excel; CAD file or the AutoCAD and any other computer-aided design files. Also proprietary information exchange such as the PDF. and industry standard exchange formats such as XML. It is recommended that drawing files are not only issued in its native CAD format, but a representative file is also issued such as the plot file or PDF. This provides an auditable and fixed basis for the tender and does not require the recipient to install a specialist CAD software. But we must remember that it is not recommended that drawings issued for quantification purposes are issued solely in PDF files. Now, let's talk about the methods of exchange. The recommended method for exchanging information are influenced by the volume of data to be exchanged rather than the complexity and size of the project. The following are examples of medium that can be used in data exchange. Physical media. For example, CD, DVD, memory sticks, or any physical platform that holds the data. There are advantages in using this type of medium of exchange. One is that the familiarity. Next is the version and revision control. Next is it has an established legal precedence. It is relatively secure as long as it is write once only mode. We will discuss more of it on the next slides. But there are also disadvantages in using a physical media. One of them is it is a slow exchange. It is expensive to reissue amended documents, and it is more appropriate to use for any size of the project, but administration cost will increase as number of disks required to be distributed increases also. The next medium of exchange is email. Email, by its very nature, is an informal communication medium, and this militates against the proper use of formal communication such as the exchange of tender documents. But using email also have advantages. First is the familiarity of the medium. Most of the people right now are familiar in using emails. And it is also a quick exchange of data. It is also inexpensive. The use of email as a medium of information exchange in e-tendering has the following disadvantages. First, there are potential security issues. Email is also an informal nature of communication medium. It lacks of inherent version and revision control. And with email, you need to have a separate follow-up communication to ensure that the tender information has been received. The easiest way to follow up is by phone call. It also limits the size of files that can be sent. So most emails has a limitation when it comes to file size to be received or to be sent. If you exceed this particular file size, then the information that you sent may be lost. There is also a legal ambiguity concerning the receipt of documents. And with email, there is no sealed bid facility. So with these disadvantages, what is the most appropriate use of email in e-tendering? Email is actually not recommended at all, but may be appropriate for exchanging documents to support the tender process, such as questionnaires and queries, and so on. Another mode of exchange or another methodology that can be used in e-tendering is the use of web-enabled tender system. For example, extranets. These are unique websites enabling access to all project team via a login name and password in order to upload or download documents. The advantages of these web-enabled tender systems are, it is a dynamic nature of this method that provides instant access to the documents. It is a secure system with electronic audit trail, and it reduces the tender administration, providing a simpler process. It has also a single source, negating the duplication of tender information, and all tenderers have access to the same information. The version and revision control will be inherent in this system. The use of web-enabled tender system also has the following disadvantages. First, mobilization cost may be significant for some participants. There is a potential overhead due to monthly subscription cost. And there is a requirement for increased technology capability. And of course, it is a proprietary system. You cannot own it, you can only subscribe on the system. And web-enabled tender system is most appropriate or suitable for any project subject to availability of technology and acceptable subscription fee. Another tender methodology that can be used is what we call online auctions or electronic auctions. Online auctions are carried out live over the internet where all tenderers can view all bids, and they are kept anonymous, with the opportunity to vary their own bid as a response to the offers made by others within a predefined period. The online auctions employed in construction industry are normally reverse auction, where the lowest price wins the tender. The advantages of these online auctions are significantly reduces the time for negotiation, and there is transparency because you can see the bids by other tenderers. It provides an earlier feedback to the tenderer, while the disadvantages are, due to pressurized nature, it may lead to inappropriate bids, and no confidentiality between individual bidder and the client. The technology requirements may restrict the participation, and reliance on full internet access for the entire duration of the auction period. So if your internet is not reliable, then there is a greater possibility that you will not win these online auctions. It is most appropriate to be used for commodity-based purchases and procuring items where there is a clear definition of specification which avoids ambiguity. And usually, construction project does not meet this requirement. Now that we have discussed the tender methodology that can be used for e-tendering, let us now talk about the technological requirement in order for us to use these methodologies. If you are using internet or online system, first you have to consider the impact of bandwidth. Bandwidth is the maximum rate of data transfer across a given path. It is therefore important to consider the following: the size and volume of document to be transferred, the recipient restrictions, and the connection speed. While if you are using a physical media exchange, such as the CD or DVD, the difference between these two is that the capacity of data that they can hold. When you use this type of media exchange, you have to make sure that you are using the warm format or the write once, read many. This is to make sure that whatever you have input or you have recorded in the CD or DVD, it can never be altered. Next is the use of memory sticks. Memory sticks cannot be write protected. As such, this method is not recommended. While email offers no certainty regarding the recipients or whether the information has actually been received by the intended recipient. It is therefore important that you keep copies of what had been sent and received, and to ensure that all the emails and attachments can be retrieved for reference at a later date. Now, if you are using web-based technology, these are often referred to as the internet, intranet, or portal. You have to consider the security issue. We will discuss about the security issue in the next slides. Also, the version and revision control should also be considered. And the compatibility with the internet browser. Not only you as the tender team, but also the internet browser of the contractors or the tenderers. Let us now talk about security. First, when we talk about security, we talk about security of files being sent or exchanged. The aim is to ensure that what is sent is received by the intended recipient and to maintain the integrity of the documents. So the use of appropriate check procedure may help to ensure the integrity of price tender documents and the documents received match those that were sent out. So this is very important. The second consideration is that the security of network or communication infrastructure. Network communication infrastructure security is essentially about protecting the document in transit. Several ways to protect these files are through file encryption, So this is basically putting in a password before you send it, and then the receiver will also have the password in order to open it. If you don't have the correct password, these files will not be readable. So that is file encryption. Also the use of secure socket layer or SSL, and some virtual private network or VPN. Another thing to consider about security is that the security of backup records management. It is advisable to check that backups extend to all tender information and related correspondences, including emails. It is also advisable to ensure that such material may be read in the future. Now, let us go to tendering procedure. How do you carry out e-tendering? First, you have to prepare a checklist of e-tendering activities. A checklist is necessary in order to ensure that all major issues are at least raised and addressed, so that the parties concerned can agree on the way forward. Where the protocols for exchange of information have not been agreed prior to commencing the process of electronic tendering, the design team should go through the simplified process to ensure that the tender information will be readily available to all parties. So after you have this checklist, you proceed with your preliminary inquiry. When issuing a preliminary inquiry or open invitation, it is important that the possible tenderers are informed that the tender exercise will be electronic. And when using a web-based service, the contractor will need to be informed how to register for the service. Now, let's talk about the preparation of tender documents. You have to have a document index. For e-tendering to be effective, all documents should be uniquely referenced and indexed, allowing easy navigation and location of the documents. If the tender includes any paper-based information, this should also be included within the index and clearly referenced in line with all other electronic documents within the tender. A good document or file naming conventions should also be observed. Good file naming practice should ensure that printed documentation can be cross-referenced to electronic file name. File naming should remain consistent across all sources of information. Each electronic file should be a complete document. For example, if you have a 100-page specification, it should be contained within a single file in a multi-page format, not as a collection of files, each containing an individual section. And drawing file names should contain the drawing number with any revision letter added to the end of the file name. So these are some suggestions in having a good file naming conventions. So how about the time for tendering? The use of e-tendering should not affect the standard procedure in dealing with the tender period. If you want to know more about tender period, please visit my previous video in Season 2, Episode 7 of the Tender Process Part 1. Now, for tender compliance, it is necessary to agree an appropriate form of procedure when tenderers are unwilling or unable to comply with the requirements specified for e-tendering. Example of these are either the tenderer will be disqualified from the tender process or to agree with the alternative to the standard specified, such as alternative file formats that are compliant with other software. It is also important to stress that general good office practice should prevail. And standard checks and balances still apply, with any arithmetical errors being dealt with in a normal way. So how about if the tenderer withdraw before the offer is being accepted? The use of e-tendering should not also affect the standard procedure in dealing with withdrawal of tenders before acceptance. To know more about this was discussed in my previous video, Season 2, Episode 7. Please visit that video. Now, the guidance on electronic offer and acceptance. The actual process of entering into a contract electronically follows the same basic rules of a written contract, where there should be an offer, an acceptance, consideration, and intention to enter into legal relations. In this discussion, we are going to talk about the offer and acceptance. Let us talk about the period until such time that the tenderer can provide its final offer. During this period, we have the so-called invitation to treat. At this stage, this is where the tender document is sent out prior to the tenderer making an offer. And as the design team or as the client team, your responsibility is to make sure that the information has been communicated successfully and there is a level playing field for all the tenderers. So how about the terms and conditions? Where are you going to put the terms and conditions? For the one-off contract, the terms and conditions should be part of the tender documents in a normal way. And if the contract documents are highly confidential, they can be encrypted before they are sent. And of course, during this time, there will be some negotiations with regards to terms and conditions. That is what we call the battle of forms. Negotiations about the exact terms of the contract. The crucial point is that the contract terms last referred to will usually be the ones that will apply, whether this is in an exchange of messages within web-based tendering system, emails, or in faxes and letters. Now, let's talk about acceptance. The terms of the contract should be very clear as to the point at which the contract is formed. In addition, those terms should also be part of the contract. For example, when sending the acceptance via email, at what particular point the contract is formed? Is it when the email accepting the offer reaches the common server? Or when it reaches the other party's mailbox? Or when it is actually open and read by the other party? So how about in online auction? At what particular point the contract is formed? Is it at the conclusion of the auction? Or the lowest bidder being automatically accepted? Or at some other point? Because of these different scenarios, these conditions should be spelled out clearly in the terms of the contract and is usually part of the invitation to tender. Now, if the parties plan to enter into a contract electronically, and this can include issuing the letter of intent, it is worth considering using electronic signature for the individuals who will be signing the contract. Also, if the contract is to be a deed, it should say so and should be signed by the director and other director or the secretary of the company. It is important to be sure that the contract is signed by these specific persons. Otherwise, the contract will not exist as a deed. We will talk more about a contract as a deed in the next episode or in the next season in contract practice. Another point to check before accepting the offer is that the exact name of the company which has made the offer. This could be different from the company which the tender documents were sent. Equally, it is important to be clear what is the exact name of the party accepting the offer. Let us now discuss the assessment of tenders and notifying the results. The use of E-Tendering should not affect any standards adopted to assess the tenders or notify the results. And for tender assessment, the electronic return of tender information should allow for a more rigorous assessment. It should be possible to fully compare and contrast the tender returns if the data is in an agreed standard format and layout. However, this benefit will only be available if standard formats are agreed and then enforced as part of the tendering process. While when using the web-based e-tendering service, this should allow questionnaires and pricing documents to be set up in a system with or without the scoring frame. For tender assessment and scoring technique, you can visit my previous video in Season 2, Episode 9 and 10. That is Part 3 and 4 of the tender process series, where I discuss the tender scoring techniques, assessment, and award. Please visit that video. Now, notifying of the results. Notifying of results can be carried out electronically, either by the production of a schedule or other agreed practice. However, it is important to take care that there is no inadvertent disclosure of the individual bidders' prices. So you have to be very careful when you notify the tenderers. It may be acceptable to use email as the notification medium at this point in process. The intention is to inform all of the tenderers involved in the process and to give them a clear understanding of the results. And if a web-based tendering system has been used, then posting the results on such a system would be the preferred approach. If you want to learn more about the recommended practices for e-tendering, you can read the RICS guidance notes on e-tendering 2nd edition. This will be my last video for Season 2 Procurement and Tendering season. Please join me next on Silver Screen as I will embark on Season 3, the Contract Practice season. I would like to request for your support by dropping like on the video and sharing the video to your friends, especially those who are preparing for EPC. And if you haven't done yet, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn on the notification bell so that you will be notified every time I upload a new video. Thank you for watching and see you in Season 3.